Grand Junction, Colorado, looked peaceful from a distance. Mountains rose around the city. Open land stretched for miles. Canyons, desert roads, and quiet places surrounded the community like a wall of silence. It was beautiful, but it was also the kind of land where someone could disappear and never be found. And in June 2007, that is exactly what happened. Her name was Paige Meredith Bergfeld. She was 34 years old. A mother of 3. A woman described by her family as loving, bright, warm, and completely devoted to her children. To the outside world, Paige looked like a typical divorced mother trying to hold life together. She lived in Grand Junction, cared for her children, ran small businesses, and tried to keep her family stable. But behind that normal life, Paige was carrying secrets. Secrets that her family did not know. Secrets that investigators would only discover after she vanished. And those secrets would turn a missing person case into a murder investigation that lasted nearly 9 years. On June 28, 2007, Paige had plans. She was going to meet her first ex-husband, Ron Beigler. Ron was not just any ex-husband. He had been Paige's high school sweetheart. Years earlier, their relationship had ended, but recently, something had started again. Paige was excited about him. Friends and family knew she had begun reconnecting with her past. For Paige, maybe it felt like life was finally giving her something back. She drove out to meet Ron at a rest stop, a halfway point between his home and hers. They spent the afternoon together. They talked. They had a picnic. For a few hours, maybe Paige was not only a struggling mother or a divorced woman carrying pressure. Maybe she was simply Paige again. Then evening came. Paige got into her car and began driving back toward Grand Junction. Around 9 p.m., she called Ron from her cell phone. She was close to home, only a few miles away. The call was short. She told him she would call him later. But that later never came. Paige never called again. The next day, Ron tried reaching her. Her phone went straight to voicemail. At first, that could mean many things. A dead battery. A misplaced phone. A busy mother caught in the chaos of life. But then Ron called Paige's home. Her live-in nanny was there with the children. And one of the children told him Paige had not been home since Thursday night. That sentence changed everything. Paige had not come home. She had not called. She had not checked on her children. For anyone else, maybe there would be a delay before panic set in. But for those who knew Paige, the alarm was instant. Paige did not disappear. Paige did not leave her kids. Ron contacted the authorities. And almost immediately, he became part of the investigation. That is how these cases begin. Police look at the last people who saw the missing person alive. They look at romantic partners, ex-husbands, spouses, anyone with emotional history. Ron had been with Paige on the day she vanished. He had spoken to her shortly before she disappeared. So investigators needed to know everything. Where had they gone? What had they talked about? When did they separate? Could anyone confirm his story? Ron cooperated, and those close to him believed he was devastated. They said he loved Paige. They said he was broken by her disappearance. Still, the investigation had to follow facts, not emotions. The last known phone call from Paige to Ron became one of the final confirmed pieces of her life. A short call. A promise to call later. Then silence. And in true crime cases, silence is never empty. It is where the mystery begins. 2 days after Paige disappeared, investigators got one of their first major leads. Someone called 911 after seeing a car on fire in an empty parking lot. When authorities arrived, they discovered the burned vehicle belonged to Paige Bergfeld. It was the same car she had been driving when she vanished. For her family, the discovery was terrifying. A missing woman is frightening enough. But a burned car says something different. It suggests someone was not only trying to hide a person. They were trying to destroy evidence. Investigators looked carefully at the vehicle. The fire appeared to have started inside the car, on the passenger side. That detail mattered. It suggested the fire was not random. It suggested someone may have known evidence could be inside. Fingerprints. Fibers. Blood. Hair. DNA. Something that could connect the wrong person to Paige. Burning the car was an act of panic or planning. Maybe both. But Paige was still missing. Her family searched for her everywhere they could. Her father Frank searched with a kind of determination only a parent can understand. He was not looking for a news story. He was not looking for closure as an idea. He was looking for his daughter. He was looking for the little girl he had raised. The woman who had become a mother. The daughter who, in his mind, would always be his child. Search teams moved through fields, desert roads, mountains, rivers, and parks. Volunteers joined. Family members walked through brutal heat and difficult terrain, hoping for one sign. A piece of clothing. A footprint. A phone. Anything. But the land around Grand Junction was cruel in its size. It was not a small neighborhood search. It was not one building or one street. It was thousands of square miles. A person could be hidden there for years. Maybe forever. And while Paige's family searched the land, investigators searched her life. They looked at the people closest to her. They looked at her relationships. They looked at her past. They studied her ex-husbands. They studied phone records. They studied the burned car. And slowly, a painful truth started to form. Paige's disappearance was not simple. There were layers to her life. There were things even her family did not know. And when those things came to light, the investigation changed direction. Because Paige Bergfeld, the devoted mother of 3, had been living another life. A life with another name. A life that may have placed her directly in danger. When someone disappears, investigators often begin with the people emotionally closest to them. In Paige's case, there were 2 ex-husbands. The first was Ron Beegler, her high school sweetheart. He had met Paige on the day she disappeared. He was one of the last people known to have seen her alive. That made him important to investigators. But Ron's behavior did not look like someone hiding guilt. He contacted authorities. He seemed distraught. He was described as devoted to Paige and deeply shaken by her disappearance. Then there was Paige's second ex-husband, Rob Dixon. Rob was the father of Paige's 3 children. Their marriage had once looked promising. He had business success. He had money. Paige and Rob built a life together in Grand Junction. They had children. They had a home. But over time, that life changed. Financial trouble entered the marriage. Rob's business ventures failed. Money disappeared quickly. The pressure grew heavier. And according to those around Paige, the relationship became tense and frightening. There had been police calls. There had been accusations of violence. Paige had written disturbing things online about fear inside the marriage. She described the fear that her children had asked if their father was going to kill her. That kind of history could not be ignored. Friends were suspicious. Some wondered if Rob had something to do with Paige's disappearance. But Rob said he was in Philadelphia when Paige vanished, around 2,000 miles away from Grand Junction. Investigators looked into it. Eventually, both ex-husbands were cleared. That was a turning point. Because if the men with the most obvious emotional connections were not responsible, then police had to look somewhere else. And that somewhere else would take them into the hidden part of Paige's world. For Paige's family, this was already unbearable. They were not only searching for her. They were learning things about her life after she was gone. Things she had never told them. Things they had to process while still hoping she was alive. That is one of the cruelest parts of a missing person investigation. The person is not there to explain. The person is not there to defend themselves. The person is not there to say why they made certain choices. So the world begins to examine them. Their relationships. Their money. Their messages. Their mistakes. Their secrets. And Paige had secrets. But secrets do not make someone less worthy of justice. They do not make a mother less of a mother. They do not make a victim responsible for what happened to her. They only show the pressure she was under. And Paige, investigators discovered, had been under more pressure than most people knew. At first, Paige's family knew her as a hardworking mother. She taught children's dance classes through a small business called Brain Dance. She sold high-end kitchen products through the Pampered Chef. She was trying to earn money, raise children, and keep her household together. But after she vanished, investigators found something else. Online, Paige was known by another name. Carrie. She had been working as a high-priced escort. For her family, the discovery was shocking. It was painful. It was almost impossible to connect that hidden life with the Paige they knew. But the truth was more complicated than judgment. Paige was under severe financial pressure. Her ex-husband had declared bankruptcy. Child support was limited. Her mortgage was extremely high. She had 3 children depending on her. People close to Paige believed she entered that world because she felt trapped by money and responsibility. They believed she was trying to provide for her children, even if the path was dangerous. Her secret life opened a new part of the investigation. Because escort work meant private meetings. It meant unknown clients. It meant people who might use fake names, disposable phones, and hidden identities. It meant Paige may have been meeting people no one in her family knew. Suddenly, investigators were not only asking where Paige was. They were asking who she had been with. Who called her that night? Who had seen her ads? Who knew her as Carrie? Who had a reason to harm her? There was no diary full of names. No simple list that told police exactly who to question. But Paige's phone records became crucial. Every number mattered. Every call mattered. Every contact from the days before her disappearance became a possible clue. One man had called Paige many times on the day she vanished. Another man had a connection that investigators found far more disturbing. His name was Lester Ralph Jones. At first, to Paige's family, he was just a name. A man they had not known. A man from the hidden side of Paige's life. But soon, investigators would discover connections between Jones and the night Paige vanished. Connections involving a prepaid phone. A burned car. A workplace across the street. And a violent past. The case was beginning to narrow. But even with suspicion growing, police still had a terrible problem. Paige was missing. And without her body, proving murder would be extremely difficult. Lester Ralph Jones was 56 years old. He worked as a mechanic at an RV shop in Grand Junction. He had a wife. He had a life that, from the outside, could appear ordinary. But investigators believed he had known Paige through her escort work. And then they found something that made him impossible to ignore. Paige's burned car had been discovered in a parking lot near the RV shop where Jones worked. That alone did not prove anything. But then search dogs tracked from the burned car toward that RV shop. For investigators, the coincidence was too large to dismiss. Then came the disposable phone. One of Paige's last contacts had come from a prepaid phone, the kind someone might buy if they did not want a call traced back to their regular number. Investigators later said surveillance video showed Jones buying that phone from Walmart. That phone had only made a small number of calls. And those calls were connected to Paige. The last call was connected to her phone around the time she disappeared. Jones denied having anything to do with Paige's disappearance. But investigators believed the phone tied him directly to her final hours. Then they looked into his criminal history. Jones had been involved in violent incidents years earlier. In one case involving his estranged wife, he had threatened to take her somewhere remote and kill her. He had served time after pleading guilty to kidnapping and assault charges. That past mattered because Paige had vanished in a region full of remote terrain. A woman missing. A burned car. A prepaid phone. A suspect with a violent history. The shape of the case was becoming clearer. But still, there was not enough. No body. No confession. No direct witness. No clear crime scene. Investigators could suspect Jones. They could focus on him. They could believe he was responsible. But belief is not enough in court. A jury needs proof. And for years, the case stayed trapped between suspicion and certainty. Paige's family knew Jones was being looked at. They knew investigators had a primary suspect. But knowing a name did not bring Paige home. It did not answer where she was. It did not let her children say goodbye. It did not give her parents the peace of burying their daughter. So the searches continued. Roads. Canyons. Dry land. Empty spaces. Every search carried two opposite prayers. Please let us find her. Please do not let us find her like this. That is the terrible conflict families face in cases like this. They want answers. But they are afraid of what the answers will be. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. And still, Paige Bergfeld was missing. For her father, Frank, the search became a mission. He did not treat Paige as a case file. He treated her as his daughter, still waiting somewhere to be found. The family searched through difficult terrain. Volunteers came out in the heat. Search teams walked through areas where every rock, every bush, every shadow could be something. But Grand Junction's landscape was unforgiving. The land was too wide. The hiding places were too many. There were canyons, gullies, fields, riverbanks, and mountain roads. A body could be hidden deep enough or far enough that people might walk nearby and never know. Paige's family had to keep living while not knowing. Her children grew older in the shadow of uncertainty. Her brother and sister-in-law helped care for them. Her parents carried grief without final proof. That is what makes a missing person case different from a confirmed death. Grief cannot fully begin. Hope cannot fully end. Every phone call can feel like news. Every search can feel like the day. Every silence can break you again. Then, 5 years after Paige vanished, there was a break. A hiker found partial human remains in a gully. Investigators responded. The remains were identified using dental records. It was Paige. After 5 years, the search ended in the way her family had feared most. Paige was no longer missing. She had been found. But she had not come home alive. The discovery brought pain, but it also brought evidence. Investigators examined the remains. They could not determine exactly how Paige died, but they found signs that told part of the story. Her cheekbone was badly fractured. Investigators believed that injury happened around the time of death. There was also duct tape near the area where her skull was found, suggesting she may have been restrained or gagged. The location also helped explain earlier evidence. Some of Paige's personal items had been found scattered along Highway 50, documents, cards, things connected to her life and children. Investigators believed those items may have been thrown from a vehicle. Maybe Paige was trying to leave a trail. Maybe, in her final moments, she was still fighting. Still thinking. Still trying to help someone find her. That possibility haunted the case. Because even at the end, Paige may have been trying to come home. Finding Paige's remains changed everything. For years, prosecutors believed they could not move forward without her body. A murder case with no body is possible, but it is difficult. Defense attorneys can argue the person may still be alive. They can argue there is no proof of death. They can create doubt. But once Paige was found, that doubt disappeared. The case was still circumstantial. There was still no confession. There was still no direct eyewitness. But now prosecutors could build a stronger story. They had the burned car. They had the location near Jones's workplace. They had the prepaid phone. They had surveillance evidence they said showed Jones buying that phone. They had phone records showing that the phone contacted Paige. They had the discovery of her remains. They had personal items that may have been thrown from a vehicle before she was taken to the place where she was found. They had Jones's violent past. And then there was a strange phone call. Law enforcement had seized vehicles connected to Jones during the investigation. Later, an officer called Jones to tell him the vehicles were ready to be picked up. It should have been a routine conversation. But during the call, Jones suddenly said something unexpected. He said the officer had asked him where he would bury a body. The officer had not asked that. That moment became important to the family and investigators. It sounded like something had slipped out. Something that had been sitting in Jones's mind. To a jury, one strange statement alone might not prove guilt. But combined with everything else, it mattered. In November 2014, more than 7 years after Paige disappeared, Lester Ralph Jones was arrested. He was charged with murder and kidnapping. When officers told him there was a warrant, he reportedly did not react with surprise. He did not ask what it was about. He simply turned around and put his hands behind his back. For Paige's family, the arrest was important. But it was not the end. An arrest is not a conviction. A charge is not justice. The prosecution still had to prove its case in court. And after nearly a decade of waiting, Paige's family would have to sit through every detail again. The secret life. The phone calls. The burned car. The remains. The duct tape. The final hours they could never fully know. Justice was closer than before. But it was not guaranteed. In July 2016, 9 years after Paige Bergfeld disappeared, Lester Ralph Jones went on trial. The courtroom became the place where years of grief, suspicion, and evidence were finally tested. The prosecution told the jury that Jones was the man responsible for Paige's kidnapping and murder. They focused on the prepaid phone. They said Jones bought it. They said the only calls from that phone were connected to Paige. They argued that those calls ended around the time she disappeared. They pointed to the burned car, found near Jones's workplace. They pointed to the seat position in the vehicle, suggesting someone taller than Paige had driven it. They pointed to Paige's personal items found along the road, as if she had been trying to leave a trail. They pointed to her remains, found years later. They pointed to Jones's past and his strange statement about burying a body. But the defense fought back. They argued the case was circumstantial. They said investigators had focused too strongly on Jones and ignored other possible suspects. They introduced alternate suspects. They told the jury there was reasonable doubt. And reasonable doubt is powerful. In a courtroom, suspicion is not enough. Emotion is not enough. A grieving family's certainty is not enough. The law requires proof. After a 6-week trial, the jury could not reach a unanimous verdict. A mistrial was declared. For Paige's family, it was devastating. They had waited 9 years. They had listened to painful evidence. They had watched strangers debate their daughter's life and death. And still, there was no final answer from the court. One juror apologized to the family. The apology was emotional, but it could not repair what had happened. The family still had to wait. Still had to return. still had to endure another trial. For many families, a mistrial feels like losing the victim all over again. The evidence is repeated. The wounds reopen. The defense arguments return. The grief is made public again. But Paige's family did not walk away. They stayed. They wanted justice. And prosecutors tried again. A second trial began. This time, the jury would not deadlock. This time, the long road from disappearance to discovery to courtroom would finally reach a verdict. The second trial ended just days after Christmas in 2016. This time, the jury reached a verdict. Lester Ralph Jones was found guilty of first-degree murder and kidnapping in the death of Paige Bergfeld. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. After almost 9 years, the court had spoken. For investigators, it was the end of a long case. For prosecutors, it was a conviction built from patience, records, evidence, and persistence. For the public, it was justice. But for Paige's family, justice was complicated. Because no verdict could bring Paige back. No sentence could restore the years her children lost without their mother. No prison term could return the woman who once filled family gatherings with warmth. Paige's father said something that explained the emptiness of justice in cases like this. What happened to Jones did not bring Paige back. If he could have made a deal to skip prison and bring Paige home, her father would have taken it. That is the truth behind many murder cases. A conviction matters. Accountability matters. But it does not undo the crime. It does not reverse the final phone call. It does not unburn the car. It does not erase the years of searching. It does not give children back the mother they needed. The world learned about Paige's secret life after she disappeared. But that secret was never the most important thing about her. Her family remembered something else. They remembered her smile. They remembered her love. They remembered how much she adored her children. They remembered a woman who was trying to survive pressure, debt, divorce, and fear. They remembered a mother who would never have willingly left her kids behind. The story of Paige Bergfeld is not just about a hidden life. It is not just about a prepaid phone, a burned car, or a convicted killer. It is about how quickly a life can disappear into silence. It is about how a family can search for years and still refuse to give up. It is about a mother whose final story was told through fragments, phone records, scattered belongings, bones, and the people who loved her enough to keep searching. Grand Junction still has its mountains. Its open roads. Its beautiful views. But for Paige's family, that landscape will always carry another memory. The place where they searched. The place where they waited. The place where they finally found her. And the place where they learned that justice can come years later. But love starts searching immediately.